in a position to control these flows like Turkey. So this creates a great sense of insecurity among citizens, because they say, oh, all these people that come through Libya, how do we know who they are? So put all this together, you have a very difficult mix. So I think Europe is doing a lot, but it's a challenge for us. What is true, European citizens do not know, most of them. We know because we work into that, but most citizens ignore the fact that countries like Turkey, Jordan or Pakistan, they also have a lot of refugees from other countries.
Yes.
And this is a dimension that is really not known. The issue today, you know, the High Commissioner for Migration from the UN is here in the country in these days. We will meet him today. Is an issue there. It's an issue there because you have the issue of the Afghan refugees in Pakistan, which is totally ignored by the rest of the. Oh, no, it's not totally ignored because we support. Through the international community, there is a support to that, but it's true that in terms of public opinion is not very known, and people are very generally, when you say, okay, we accept when we received like 500,000 people, and in Pakistan there are 2 million actually, and people look at you, yeah. They don't know. They simply don't know. So it's true that the problem of refugees is very prominent. It's true at the same time that Europe has to focus now on its own refugees. We are not in a position to really make a major effort for the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. This is the reason, because all the attention is focused on our internal flows.
Exactly, because there's a huge flow of refugees in Europe as well. Well, talking of European states, there are a lot of countries that are willing to be part of the European Union. Turkey, of course, you cited an example. You've got Bosnia and Herzegovina, you've got Kosovo, you've got Iceland, but Iceland withdrew in 2013. What are the criteria which makes a country eligible to be part of the European Union?
Yeah, the criteria are very precise, and they were established when we had the great enlargement. We started 6, then we had progressive enlargements, a small number of states every time. But then we have a big enlargement in 2006, 10 countries from Eastern Europe, and then other 2, Bulgaria and Romania, joined the European Union. This was the former communist countries. After the process of transition, they came in. So there, in order to greet them, to accept them, we had to establish very precise criteria. And these criteria are the so-called Copenhagen criteria, because they were established in Copenhagen. Basically, they say that in order to be a member of the European Union, you have to be a European country, which seems obvious, but this is very important for the case of Turkey. And it's very important because in the past, maybe you don't know, but Morocco had requested joining the European Union in the 90s, and they didn't have these European characteristics. So geographically European. You need to be a market economy. You need to be a democracy. You have to be all the freedoms that are associated to a full democracy, which means freedom of opinion, press, religion, and no discrimination of any kind. And you need to be a market economy, and you have to accept the European regulations in their integrality. So you cannot enter in what we call a la carte. You cannot say, okay, you know, I want this, but I don't want that.
You have to fulfill all the criteria.
Yeah. You have to fulfill all the criteria, and you have to accept and introduce in your legislation all the regulations. There is something that maybe the viewers do not know. The European Union is not just an international organization doing things together. The European Union is a system of rules and laws. So the European law is part of the national law. When you join the European Union, more or less half of your laws will be of European origin, which means that is a very, very serious step. It's not just that you can take what you want and not what you desire less. It's a very serious commitment. So for this reason, we need a transition of several years in order to adjust. In the countries that you mentioned, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Kosovo, are countries in the Balkans. They were affected by a civil war in the 90s. So as a way out to the civil war, we offered joining the European Union as an ultimate step to really overcome the problems of the past. They joined enthusiastically. Some of them are already members. Croatia is already a member. Slovenia was already a member before. Slovenia, Croatia, and then the other will come. But they have to fulfill this criteria. And this is happening. But this is the last bunch of countries that will join the European Union. From 6 we moved to 28. We will move to 30-something after the Balkan countries will have entered in the next decade. And then there is the still unknown Turkey. But we will not extend beyond because there are no further candidates.
All right. Well, the European Union also administratively is quite strong. We've got 7 major institutions that administer different parts of the European Union. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, the European Union is a complex body because it's not a state and is not an international organization. It's somewhere in the middle. We are more than an international organization because the European Union has its own laws, and these laws are laws of the country. So if you are a member of the European Union, European law is part of your juridic body of laws. But we are not a state. We are less than a state in the sense that we have a sovereignty through our shared system of sovereignty. But so there are some parts of our living together which are ruled by European regulations. Regulation is the name for law in Europe, European laws. But we are less than a state in the sense that we are not even a federal state. We are a unique combination of sovereignty where we put together the economic dimensions. We have a common market, we have a common trade policy, we have a common foreign policy. I belong to a body which is the Foreign Service of the European Union, where we have diplomats from the States and diplomats from the EU working together. And we have more and more of a political community where we are together of a number of all political decisions are taken together, which is sometimes complex. So we have a main body, which is the European Commission. The European Commission is sort of government of the European Union.
Fine.
But actually you have the 28. The European Commission can only carry out initiatives that have been approved by the 28 governments of the European Union, which is the so-called Council. So it's a complex system of precise attributions, and is a bit complex to understand from outside, actually.
Of course, you've got the European Parliament, you've got
yes,
the
then
Council
there
of
is
the
the European Parliament,
Union,
where
you've got the European Commission, you've got the Court of Justice, you've got so many organizations that handle different aspects of all those countries that are part of the European Union. But there's one thing that is very prevalent nowadays, that is climate change. The world is talking about it. A lot of things are happening. You see, even in countries like Pakistan, you've got sudden rains, sudden change of temperatures that were not occurring before in other parts of the world as well. You've got an environmental policy in the European Union. How important is climate change as part of that environmental policy?
Absolutely, is fundamental. I would say that environmental regulation are probably one of the best achievements of the European Union, talking of European territory, in the sense that most of our regulation, the standards, the environmental standards we have are very high. And all this has been produced at European level. It would have been unthinkable that all our countries would have given the same importance to that without an initiative coming from Europe. So we dare to say that the European territory probably the safest in terms of environmental, the highest standards are those that our citizens enjoy in the European Union, thanks to this constant effort of our environmental bodies. I talk of contamination of soils, of food standards, a number of air, water. So it's very difficult to do bad things in Europe due to this heavy regulation. In terms of foreign policy, climate change is one of the axes of our foreign policy. Actually, is one of the main issues which is integral part of our dialogue and with our partners. And this is also true with Pakistan. We are the main donor in terms of climate change worldwide. This is still not totally true in Pakistan for a number of reasons. First of all, because Pakistan is very much affected. It's one of the countries potentially most affected by climate change. But it's also true that the awareness of that has been a bit slow in Pakistan compared to other countries. So, I mean, the Ministry for Climate Change is relatively recent. The policy for climate change is relatively recent. Actually, it was prepared in prevision of this meeting in Paris last year, COP21. So certainly the European Union, then you know the concept of Green Fund. The Green Fund is this fund for developing countries or emerging countries that are very much affected. And we really wish that Pakistan is able to present good projects, not necessarily national, could be national, could be regional projects.
Exactly.
And certainly the European Union is ready to be a main contributor to this Green Fund. We have important funds attributed to that. Despite economic crisis, the cooperation, this is very important for you to know, that despite the economic crisis in which we are since 2008, you would be surprised to listen that the European citizen is in favor of budgetary cuts everywhere, with the exception of cooperation to development and climate change.
Right.
So there is a consciousness of the European citizen that we cannot reduce our effort with our developing partners just in view of our own economic difficulties.
I think that's very important, Mr. Gatto, in the present circumstances, that you still keep your priority despite the issues that you are facing. We are in conversation with Mr. Stefano Gatto, Deputy Head of Mission of the European Union. We'll be back after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Diplomatic Enclave. I'm Umar Khalid Butt, and we're in conversation with Mr. Stefano Gatto, the Deputy Head of Mission of the European Union in Pakistan. Before the break, we were talking to Mr. Gatto about the foreign policy of the European Union. Let's take it back from there. Mr. Gatto, you were talking about different elements of your foreign policy. Could you highlight some of the other elements as well?
Well, the main objective of our foreign policy, which is adopted by the 28 member states of the European Union together, is essentially peace and stability, promotion of peace and stability in the world, promotion of economic development. For this reason, we are the main contributor to development in the world as the main provider of cooperation and development fund. And now the promotion of democracy is very important. For this reason, for example, we are present with election observation missions. We were here in Pakistan twice with a significant election observation missions. We give the promotion of democracy and human rights a lot of importance. And you know how this issue of human rights sometimes becomes a bit tense in some countries. And as we mentioned before, climate change now has become one of the axes and climate change is very much linked to development and to governments, actually.
True.
The capacity of the states to face the challenge of climate change in their own country.
All right. Well, apart from the foreign policy, you've got different other aspects. You've got a unified cultural policy. You work on the infrastructure of all the countries that are included in the European Union. And there's also the economy. Now, you've got a single market economy. Yes. How does it work? Because, of course, we know that there are certain issues that are going on as far as economy is concerned in the European Union. But how do you work around putting 28 countries on a single way of dealing with the economy?
Listen, the single market was not done in a day. You have to say Rome was not done in a way. The single market was not done in a day neither. It took like 30 years to emerge. Essentially, the principle of the single market is that you don't have any kind of national discrimination within the market, which means that it is structured around what we call the four freedoms, the four liberties: freedom of circulation of goods, services, capital, and persons. This was done in this order. We started by eliminating all tariffs to the movement of goods. So all tariffs now at zero, since 66, year 66, there are no internal duties anymore. which means that a good produced in one or the other country of the European Union is treated exactly the same. Then discrimination is also, the non-discrimination requirement is applied also to all other kind of regulation that could appear, because you, and some member states tried during the 50s, the 60s, to introduce parallel legislation that would counterbalance the fact that tariffs were not there anymore. You don't have the duty anymore. This 10, 20, 30% duty that you paid on imports has disappeared, so they tried to introduce other mechanisms to control. This was also declared illegal, so there are no discrimination of any kind. So goods is exactly the same to produce a good in Britain or in Italy or in Hungary. It's the same. And they can circulate with no discrimination. The same is also for the financial flows, capitals. The same is true for investment. There are no barriers to investment. You can move your funds with no barriers. And it's also true, I mentioned this as the fourth because it's the fourth that appeared in terms of time. There is also freedom of movement of persons. So a citizen, a European citizen, can move freely within Europe and can establish his residence whenever he wants. He can work, study, live wherever he decides. So he's free to do it. This meant that most European citizens, they live outside their country? No. Only 10 to 15% of people live actually outside their country. Mostly of them are young people. Young people now, they jump very much on job offers within Europe. It's very common for a young Italian, a young French, a young German to go abroad for a number of years to make experience, to learn new languages, and so this is very common. And this is totally possible. There are no discriminations. So it takes a while, but it creates a new environment where actually you belong to a country, but at the same time you belong to a wider community in this way. This is also true in other parts of the world. If you think Latin America or to South Asia, there is a sense that you are also Latin American and you are also South Asian, but you don't have the single market. You don't have this opportunity. Just think about traveling from India to Pakistan. Well, it's not easy, or the opposite, I mean. So clearly there is not this dimension is not comparable. So this feeling of being European actually is nurtured by policies like, for example, we have a common space for culture and education, which means, in practical terms, means that you can follow your university studies in another country of the European Union. We supported this through a program called Erasmus, which is now open also to students from outside the world. And actually there are around 50 Pakistanis that will join Erasmus Mundus next year, which means that they will follow a semester in a European university, and this semester is compatible with their own studies in Pakistan. This has become massive now in Europe. More or less 20 to 30% of the students during their curriculum, they have in their curriculum one semester abroad. This is decisive. I did it myself before the program existed. I did it I was Italian, I went to Spain, and since then Spanish and Spain are my second home.
All right.
So this helps you enormously to have a different vision of Europe, of the world, if you have been sharing time and studies with our fellows of your own age. So this is an important component of Europe. And this leads to some developments that are unique. For example, you probably don't know that a European citizen not only can live and work whenever he wants, wherever he wants within the European Union, but also can be elected member of parliament. He can be